And they're just punishing Sophie for having a spine that nobody else has, and that's why she's my hero, along with the other guest you have here, Jennifer Say.
Sophie Cunningham has just completed one of the most unexpected rises in women's basketball. The Indiana Fever Guard has officially been named BET Sportswoman of the Year, and this was not an award won against a weak group of nominees. Sophie stood beside Olympic champions, global tennis stars, boxing champions, track athletes, and some of the biggest names in basketball. But when the winner was announced, it was Sophie Cunningham who walked onto the stage. She accepted the trophy. She pointed towards the crowd, and suddenly, one of the most talked about players in the WNBA had another reason to dominate the headlines. But Sophie did not reach this moment by following the usual path. She was not the league's leading scorer. She was not the #1 draft pick. And she was not the player most people expected to become one of the biggest stories in women's basketball. Sophie won by building something different, a powerful connection with fans, a reputation for speaking honestly, and a willingness to stand firm even when the reaction became uncomfortable.
In vein, in that story with ESPN, you talked about wanting to protect young girls who shouldn't have to go against biological men. Just can you expand your viewpoint on that?
I mean, I think I said what I said. I think it's kind of common sense. And I think I'll always believe in that. I think it's really important to protect children. And that's little girls who are also involved in that category. And so I stand on what I said, and I always believe that.
Yeah. Do you see your advocacy on that, like taking any form going forward?
You know, I don't know. I'm not a very political person, but I do have beliefs. I have morals, and I'll always stand on those and be true to who I am. And I think people are going to take it how they want to take it, but I've never even really said anything about that. And so when it comes just to protecting young girls in sport and women in sport, I feel very strongly about that. I think that's why you have Title IX. That's why you have some of the greats in women's sports. If Title IX and women's sports weren't protected, then you wouldn't hear about any type of women in sport. And so I think in the future, it's just really important to protect.
So let me ask you this. Do you think Sophie Cunningham would deserve to win an award like BET Sportswoman of the Year? Comment Y for yes. Just type the letter Y below, because this award would represent much more than one basketball season. It would show how quickly Sophie's profile had moved beyond the court. For years, Sophie was known as a tough and emotional WNBA competitor. She defended her teammates, she talked back, she made big shots, and she never appeared interested in shrinking herself to make anybody else comfortable. But then her voice began attracting just as much attention as her basketball. Sophie started appearing in interviews where she spoke openly about confidence, competition, and the pressure facing female athletes. She said what she believed. She refused to use carefully prepared answers. And as the attention grew, so did the reaction. Some fans praised her, others criticized her, but almost nobody ignored her. That became clear when Sophie publicly supported keeping girls' and women's sporting competitions based on biological sex. She framed her position around fairness, safety, and protecting opportunities for female athletes. Her comments immediately created controversy. Opposing fans booed her. Demonstrators appeared outside arenas. Coaches and players were asked to respond. And supporters began arriving at Fever games carrying signs thanking Sophie for speaking up. The controversy followed Indiana from city to city. Seattle, Portland, Minnesota. Each arena brought another reaction, but Sophie continued showing up. She played through the noise. She answered questions. And she repeatedly said she would not hide or dim her light because people disagreed with her. That attitude turned her into something larger than a role player. To her supporters, Sophie became a symbol of courage. To her critics, she became one of the most controversial figures in the league. And to the WNBA, she became impossible to avoid. Every time Sophie touched the basketball, the crowd reacted. Every interview created another headline. Every rally brought more cameras. And every attempt to silence the controversy seemed to make it even bigger. Therefore, if Sophie were named BET Sportswoman of the Year, the decision would not be based only on points, rebounds, or assists. It would be based on influence. BET's Sportswoman of the Year award celebrates athletes who create an impact far beyond the scoreboard. That includes winning, but it also includes cultural relevance, leadership, and the ability to connect with an audience. Sophie's supporters would argue that few athletes created more discussion during the year. She entered hostile arenas and refused to look intimidated. She stood beside her teammates when pressure increased. And she showed that an athlete does not need to be the biggest star on the roster to become one of the strongest voices in the sport. That does not mean the decision would be accepted quietly. The reaction would be immediate. Some fans would celebrate Sophie's victory as proof that speaking honestly still matters. They would say she was rewarded for refusing to change her beliefs when the criticism became intense. Others would argue that the award should have gone to an athlete with stronger statistics, championships, or international achievements. They would question whether controversy had become more valuable than performance. And that debate would only make Sophie's victory even bigger, because the award would expose a difficult question about modern sport. What does it mean to be the Sportswoman of the Year? Is it simply about being the best player? Is it about winning championships? Or can an athlete win because she shaped the wider conversation around women's sport? In this hypothetical scenario, BET would be answering that question clearly. Sophie Cunningham did not have to dominate every statistical category. Her impact came from showing up under pressure. She became the player people wanted to interview, the player crowds wanted to react to, and the player whose comments forced coaches, league officials, and teammates to decide how they would respond. Even Caitlin Clark was eventually asked how the Fever were handling the controversy surrounding Sophie. Caitlin gave a careful answer. She said the team was managing it well. She placed responsibility on leagues and governing bodies. Then she redirected the conversation back towards basketball. That response showed how large the story had become. Sophie's comments were no longer only about Sophie. They were affecting the entire Fever organization. They were following Indiana into every press conference. And they were turning regular season games into national conversations. Then came the moment on the BET Award stage. Sophie stood behind the microphone wearing black and holding the trophy. She looked towards the crowd and thanked the people who supported her. She spoke about the importance of believing in yourself. She thanked her family, teammates, and fans. But the most powerful moment came when she addressed the criticism. Sophie said she understood that not everybody would agree with her. She said disagreement did not have to become hatred. And she insisted that women should never be afraid to speak honestly about issues that affect them. The room reacted. Some people cheered, some remained quiet. But once again, Sophie Cunningham had created a moment that nobody could ignore. That is what would make this hypothetical victory so important. It would not simply add another trophy to Sophie's career. It would confirm that her influence had moved beyond basketball. Her name would now sit beside athletes who changed their sports through championships, records, and Olympic medals. Sophie's path would be different. She would have reached the stage through resilience, personality, and the courage to stand in the center of a national debate. Whether people loved the decision or hated it, they would be talking about it. And that has become the story of Sophie Cunningham. She speaks, the reaction grows, she keeps moving, and the spotlight follows. So would Sophie Cunningham deserve to be named BET Sportswoman of the Year? Would the award recognize courage and influence? Or should it always go to the athlete with the strongest achievements on the court? Let me know what you think in the comments.
Who defends more men than Andrew Tate? I would tell you, no institution defends men and protects them more than the WNBA. No institution.
Sophie Cunningham walked into Minnesota knowing exactly what was waiting for her. The boos had already followed her through Portland. Supporters and critics were gathering outside Fever games, and every time Sophie answered another question, the controversy seemed to grow even bigger. But this time, the message was waiting inside the building. Minnesota Lynx coach Cheryl Reeve arrived wearing a shirt that read, "Trans kids belong."
Because the WNBA, two coaches, one of them being Caitlin Clark's coach, the other one being a coach that they just went up against, they were having a game, and at this game, she decides to wear a shirt at the game playing against Sophie Cunningham. After Sophie made the comments about transgender, she wears the shirt, if you can show it on the sidelines, what the shirt says. You know, trans kids, this is it right here. That's the coach. Trans kids belong. They had a conversation together.
Fans wore matching messages in the stands. Demonstrators gathered outside Target Center, and the moment Sophie touched the basketball, the arena made its feelings clear. She was booed again and again.
Checking into the game, Golden Eagles, Sophie Cunningham.
But then something happened before the game that almost nobody expected. Cheryl Reeve walked to center court and spoke directly with Sophie Cunningham. And after the game, Caitlin Clark was finally asked what the Fever thought about the controversy surrounding their teammate. What Caitlin said was brief, controlled, and much more revealing than it first appeared. This story began when Cunningham publicly supported excluding transgender girls and women from girls' and women's sporting competitions. Sophie framed her position around fairness and protecting opportunities for women and young girls. She also repeatedly said that she did not hate anyone and believed there was room to love everybody. But once those comments went public, the reaction moved far beyond one interview. Supporters began appearing outside Fever games carrying signs thanking Sophie for speaking up. Opposing fans responded with transgender flags, shirts, and loud boos. Then the Seattle controversy exploded. Two teenage Sophie supporters said a Seattle Storm co-owner confronted them over a sign thanking Cunningham for speaking up for girls.
Women activists are set to rally at this weekend's WNBA games in key Democratic strongholds like Portland and Minneapolis to show their support for Cunningham after the Indiana Fever player spoke out against biological males competing in women's sports. They're calling it Sophie Night. This comes after a chaotic and frankly horrific incident this week where two teenage girls, fans of Cunningham, went to the Seattle Storm game versus the Fever and said that co-owner Celeste Keaton cursed at them, yelled at them, berated them for daring to wear pro-women's sports gear. By the way, just XX and XY t-shirts. One of the teens is now speaking out about the exchange that made her cry.
The WNBA eventually fined that owner and suspended her from attending 5 Storm home games. That incident transformed Sophie from a player expressing a controversial opinion into the center of a much larger fight involving speech, fan treatment, and women's sport. The pressure then followed Indiana into Portland. Sophie was booed when she entered that game, but she refused to act intimidated. She said she was there to play basketball and to be herself. She insisted she would not hide or dim her light simply because some people disagreed with her. Then she went out and helped Indiana win. But Minnesota felt different. This was not only another hostile road crowd. Cheryl Reeve had decided to make her own position impossible to miss. Under her jacket was a light blue shirt carrying 3 clear words: "Trans kids belong." That was the public message. Then came the private conversation. Before tip-off, cameras captured Reeve and Cunningham meeting near center court.
At center court, pregame, and yesterday, Cheryl Reeve spent a lot of time talking at length with the media about this topic.
I would encourage anyone to go and listen to Cheryl Reeve's comments, incredibly thoughtful.
With all the tension surrounding the matchup, viewers immediately wondered whether this was about to become an argument. It did not. According to Reeve, both women understood that they had influential platforms. She said they spoke about wanting to educate, acknowledged they shared some common ground, and also had areas where they disagreed. Reeve said the way people handle those disagreements matters. She refused to reveal every detail of their conversation, but described meeting Sophie face-to-face positively.
Before the game, you had a conversation with Sophie Cunningham.
I did.
If you want to share what you talked
Absolutely
about, feel
not.
free. But
Absolutely not.
more of my question is just how important is it to have those like in-person conversations with people that
I think it's
have
great.
different views?
I think it's great. I think both of us understand that we have platforms. And, we both talked about, wanting to, more than anything, educate. And there are some things that, we have in common and maybe some things you differ on, just like any issues. And I think it's how you handle things. And so, it was nice to be in person for sure.
And honestly, that may have been the most surprising moment of the entire night. Because online, this controversy has been presented like two opposing sides that can't even stand in the same room together. But when Sophie and Reeve actually met, they spoke directly. No screaming. No public humiliation. No dramatic walk-off. They clearly did not agree on everything, but they still had the conversation. Then the game started, and the crowd delivered the emotional reaction Reeve had avoided. Sophie was booed on her first touch, and the reaction did not disappear after one possession. The boos continued throughout the game whenever Cunningham became involved.
Sophie Cunningham checks in, gets booed, and then right after getting booed, she goes out and she does this.
Loses the handle right to Sophie Cunningham, who knocks in the three and then lets the crowd hear about it.
The Fever are so dangerous spot to make that one, and another sweet spot, Sophie Cunningham from three. You gotta be all
cold-blooded Sophie Cunningham, and then she gets to the free throw line, gets booed again. Sinks the free throw, but then comes back and does this.
And Cunningham picks it off.
To the sound of boos as she's finishing. Keeps it going. Third quarter, comes in and does this.
Now it's Boston facing pressure. So good in those situations.
That is huge.
Folks, listening to everybody boo Sophie Cunningham and her just hitting three after three after three after three.
Outside the arena, competing groups made their positions clear. Some signs thanked Sophie. Others supported transgender women. Inside, fans wore shirts matching the message on Reeves' chest. This was the third consecutive Fever game that had attracted demonstrations connected to Cunningham's comments. The controversy was no longer background noise. It had become part of the atmosphere surrounding Indiana wherever the team traveled, and that placed Caitlin Clark in a difficult position. Caitlin knows that almost anything she says can immediately become a headline. A direct endorsement of Sophie's position would have intensified the controversy. A direct criticism of Sophie could have created an entirely different story involving the Fever locker room. So after Minnesota defeated Indiana 108-100, Caitlin was asked how the team was dealing with all the outside conversations. Her answer was extremely controlled. Caitlin said the Fever were handling it excellently. Then she said it was the responsibility of leagues and governing bodies to work with athletes and find solutions. But Caitlin quickly redirected the conversation back toward basketball. She said Indiana's focus was on basketball, finding ways to win, and correcting what went wrong against Minnesota. Then a reporter asked whether she had any further reaction. Caitlin answered, "I just answered." That response will be interpreted in completely different ways. Some people will say Caitlin refused to defend Sophie. Others will argue that she did exactly what a team leader should do. She protected the locker room, refused to turn her teammate into a public argument, and kept the Fever focused on basketball. But Caitlin clearly understood the position she had been placed in. She was being invited to choose a side in front of the cameras immediately after a loss. Instead, she placed responsibility on leagues and governing bodies, then returned the focus to Indiana's performance. That was not an emotional endorsement of Sophie's position, but it was not a public rejection of Sophie either. It was Caitlin drawing a line around the team, and Sophie appears determined to keep moving forward in exactly the same way. She has said the rallies do not consume her or her teammates. She describes herself as someone who loves basketball, loves the people around her, and wants to inspire the next generation positively. At the same time, she has made it clear that she will not pretend to believe something different simply because the public reaction has become uncomfortable. Sophie previously said she would not hide or dim her light because people disagreed with her. That is why the boos may not be having the effect her critics want. Every hostile arena gives Sophie another opportunity to prove that she will not back down. Every rally creates more attention, and every public response from someone as important as Cheryl Reeve or Caitlin Clark makes the story even bigger. The most revealing part of the Minnesota game was not simply that Sophie Cunningham was booed. It was that three major figures handled the pressure in three completely different ways. Cheryl Reeve made her position visible, but still spoke privately and respectfully with Sophie. Caitlin Clark refused to be dragged into a public fight and pushed the focus back towards basketball. And Sophie Cunningham absorbed the boos without changing her position. This controversy is no longer disappearing between games. It is following the fever from city to city, entering arenas before tip-off and forcing everyone around Sophie to decide how they will respond. So what did Caitlin Clark's answer really mean? Was she protecting Sophie by refusing to feed the controversy? Or did her decision not to offer a stronger defense tell us something else? Let me know what you think in the comments.